Hello, my name is Erin. I am second year MBA student. I am here to welcome you to GMAT Club's application walkthrough. It's a 6-week series covering applications to top 25 MBA programs. Every Thursday and Friday for 6 weeks, we will feature admission experts and admission teams going step by step through every aspect of the online application. Be sure to subscribe to our channel to stay updated and support us in organizing more events. I'll be your host, and in today's walkthrough, we are covering MIT Sloan. Together with me is Liza, founder of Get House Admissions. Liza has helped hundreds of people with their MBA applications. Welcome, Liza. It's so nice to have you here.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be back on the screen with GMAT Club. I always enjoy the events here, and especially when I get to talk about my alma mater, MIT Sloan. So I'm really excited to be here. Shall I go ahead and get started, Erin?
Yes, so we can directly go.
Awesome. Great. Well, everybody, so as you can see, hopefully on my screen, you can see that the welcome email that will await you when you are applying to MIT Sloan. I like it personally. This is from Donna Levinson, who has been the Assistant Dean of Admissions for the past several years, ever since Rod Garcia retired and left the school. And I like this just because in the very first sentence, it just gives you a sense of what MIT Sloan, actually the second one, is what MIT Sloan is all about. Thanks for your interest in joining the MIT community. MIT Sloan is home to bold, curious, capable leaders inventing the future. Just sets the right tone. So I like this little intro. We're not going to spend a lot of time in here. All the schools have it, but it's just nice to see, and also gives you some chances to check out some of the FAQs if you need to. But let's go ahead and start jumping into this app. And Erin, please interrupt me as necessary. If you get any questions from the audience, I'm always delighted to chat with you guys again, especially about this school. So again, right at the top on this overview, this is the overview tab. We get the first statement here is we're on a quest to find curious, passionate, analytical candidates who will enhance the collaborative community here at Sloan. Thinking back about my days at Sloan, which was admittedly a while ago, it's a very scrappy place where everybody comes together and collaborates. And I think you'll see these themes throughout Sloan's online application as well, which is also just always reassuring to know the school really lives by its sort of mantras that it puts forth. But anyway, this overview is, I think there's some good things to take a peek at here, but it's more just like details, but a few details before we get started. I think the important part here to note is a few things. Number one, it takes time to embark on an MBA journey. I will tell you that umpteen times. It's a lot of time. And I think Sloan is saying like here, spend your time accordingly. This is not a quick job. If you are not already well on your way on your Sloan applications for the deadline on September 27th, that might mean you're actually thinking about round 2 is your better play just because of the amount of time. I'll say this and we'll dive into it, but Sloan actually has a smaller, shorter application, but deceivingly so. It actually requires, I think in some ways, more thought to take advantage of the limited space that you have in the application. You'll see a few additional details here. All applications are due by 3 p.m. Eastern. Write that down if you are applying. I have had folks that have missed the time when the application's due, and I don't want that to be you. 3 p.m. Eastern is when it's due, on the day that it's due. Don't miss it. And the other thing to know is they need everything in, even your letter of recommendation. Sloan only needs one, which is great, but you need it done. There's a few other things here. There is an application fee that you must pay for $250. There are ways to apply for a waiver, so you can do that to see if you can qualify for it. There's a few other details here. The interview time frame. So interviews at Sloan, they are by invitation only. And typically they come out in round 1, they'll come out towards the end of October usually. Sometimes it's come later. They used to be rolling. Fortunately, now they come out pretty much all at the same time typically. And so you will hear from the school about that, but that's generally the time frame that you'll hear. And then you can see that the interviews themselves happen in November, and then the decisions are released in early December. And that's about it from this page. I want to keep going so we can start doing the good stuff and entering stuff in. So this is just the personal information. If you want to do this while we chat, you certainly can. I'm not going to totally fill it all in because that would get not very exciting for you guys to watch me type. But a few things. I love it when schools ask for your preferred first name. I think most of them do now, but it's just nice. My real name is actually Elizabeth. I think my mom calls me Elizabeth when I'm in trouble or something like that. Otherwise, I go by Liza. Just about everybody else calls me Liza. So I like that, the schools ask that. It's these little things that show us schools really care about folks. So you can see here two things. Like a lot of schools will ask your mailing address and your permanent address, but Sloan just asks for your address. So you can go here, and then once you're inside, you can clarify if it's mailing or permanent. So you could just say, you could say where you are. Let's see, Brooklyn. I'm making this all up on the fly. And then if you needed to, you could enter a different one. And then you're all set. This is not going to go through, but it will. And then if you wanted to, I could add a different one. Don't overthink that. Think about, okay, if there's a mailing address, if it's one and the same, it's all good. Just enter one. Don't overthink these things. Just keep it easy. Current location, I think that's just helpful for them to realize, okay, are you on location? Are you traveling? You can enter that in as well. And then you see below, you have your email address. You could give another email if you wanted to. Again, it's up to you. The big headline I'm going to say on filling this stuff out is there's no really way to game the system. Some people are like, but should I put this? Is it okay if I have a different mailing address to a current address? They're not looking for reasons to say no to you, like that on some technicality like that. All of this stuff, there's no way to, there's ways to really be thoughtful when it comes to your essays, but much less on this sort of capturing the data type questions. So they also have your birth date, your native language. They also ask for your sex in a binary fashion, but then they also give you the opportunity to express your gender identity and provide that information. Sometimes I get questions about this too. Should I enter this or that? Or, I don't feel comfortable entering this. I want to respond with that. And those are all personal and valid decisions. However you want, whatever makes sense for you, what feels true to you. Again, there's nothing here that this is purely for just trying to understand the folks that are applying to them. So try not to read too much into this question, and feel free to answer it as feels most appropriate to you. If you have a dual citizenship, again, sometimes people feel like, is it advantageous if I have a dual citizenship or if I'm international? Those are things that are outside of your control. Try not to worry about them. Answer them as you would, and be comfortable with it. Is being an international applicant helpful? It can be. It can be. But it doesn't. None of those things move the needle, and none of those things are in your control. And sometimes they're just facts. So try not to worry too much about this stuff. I will say they ask about whether or not you have had military service, and this is common. Could be common in the U.S., but I also see it a lot for international applicants who serve time often before they apply for their MBA program. They also ask if you are a first-generation student, if your parents did not complete an undergraduate degree. So that's all the kind of a lot of this is like the data. Not surprisingly, it's MIT Sloan. It wants the data, but the kind of quick filling in of the information. So we want to spend a little bit more time on the academic record. Not too much, but I do want to talk about actually it's in two pages from now, a little bit about the relevant coursework. But you can see that Sloan asks that you upload a copy of your transcript. I think what's important here is often people think that they have to go get their official transcript. You actually don't need to provide an official transcript, so that one that is released directly from the school to MIT, unless you are accepted, and they would be referring to that during the background check that they conduct after you've been accepted. So what's really important, so don't worry about that. What is important, and this can get kind of tedious and confusing, and that's going to be another big headline I have for you guys today. So you're going to, maybe you've gone to multiple institutions. Maybe you did a study abroad program in one country, and you have, and maybe those classes are on your original transcript, but maybe they're not. There's all these sort of like nitty gritty that are very dependent to your situation. So number one, I would say you want to read through. You can see some important details. They try to, with these bullets, encompass the most common situations. But if you're really not sure what to do, give the school a call, send them an email, or make an educated guess and then address it briefly in the application. So again, it's not, I think, follow the directions, do what they're asking. But sometimes you're going to be like, but I have this weird situation, this situation that's not quite typical. Call them. They're surprisingly friendly when you call them. I mean, all the schools are. They're totally happy if it's going to help you have more confidence when filling out this application. So keep that in mind. And then you can add the institution where you went, as well as the country, the dates, the level of study, the format of study. And often we get this question of what's your GPA? And what I like about Sloan is that they ask you, if you calculated it, how you calculated it. So if you are not on a 4.0 scale, you can calculate for it and provide that explanation here here to Sloan. So I think that's it in terms of the institution. So this is, I like this because actually this next question, additional academic details, probably about 5 years ago, I've been coaching for a long time. About 5 years ago, Sloan took away this sort of like question about academics. Their kind of belief was, all right, well, if you have something to tell us, like, we can figure it out. So they briefly got rid of this question. They briefly got rid of an optional essay question. And I'm glad that it's back. So the question is, are there any areas of concern with regard to your academic record? If so, briefly explain here in a few sentences. If you, for example, if you possibly, did not do well when you first got to university because you were juggling too many things, because you weren't used to the rigor, perhaps there was a personal situation going on. Could be that you transferred schools. There's so many things that it's not even necessarily, quote, a red flag. But if you have the opportunity, there's something that's going to have somebody say, I wonder what happened there. Then take a sentence or two and explain it here. So for example, if you had lower grades in those first 2 years or in your final year, whatever year it might be, you might just take a sentence or two to explain it. What you do not want to do is get defensive or share excuses. You just want to own the situation and tell them what happened. The first 2 years of school, I was struggling to acclimate to a school in a new country, or a major that was especially rigorous, or the demands of living in a city while juggling school and some personal obligations. My grades suffered as a result. By the final 2 years, I was doing much better. Whatever it might be, you're just kind of stating the facts so that you're giving them the answers so that they're not there like, wondering, oh, okay, now we know the situation. Now we can move on. So if you have any things that might give someone pause, use this box to explain what was going on. Okay. Note that they also ask whether or not you have a STEM degree. This does not necessarily mean if you don't have a STEM degree that they're not going to be interested in you at all. It's just, again, they're trying to do some data collection here on who's reaching out to them. Okay. So test
Maybe a
scores.
school
Oh,
gap
yes.
too, right, Liza?
Yes.
Like a school gap, if they have a year gap, they can
Yes.
also explain it here.
Yes, exactly. That's a great question. So let me just go. Actually, I'm not going to try going back because with my luck, I can just go like this. Yeah. So if you took a gap year, often folks take gap years, especially, even everywhere, they're taking some gap years before they go to school. This can be certainly an opportunity to do that. This can be if it took you more years to graduate. Maybe you extended your time and took a few extra courses. Maybe you changed majors. Erin, that's a great question because there's all these little things like this doesn't mean like, I have to be explaining something bad. I could just be connecting the dots for the reader so they know what's going on. So if you took a gap year and did something, the year after I graduated from high school, I spent half the year traveling, and the second half of the year I spent working locally and living with my parents before I went to school. Could be absolutely anything. It's more just about connecting the dots for them. The gap year, actually, I probably would put the gap year on there. But definitely anything that's just maybe not, quote, typical, however you like, that's going to be the norm that they see, just explain it for them. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great question.
And I've got another question
Yeah.
too here from Sar. If we have a high GPA, but there were 7 pass-fail courses on our transcript, is that something to call attention to?
Well, they're going to see your whole transcript and they're going to scrutinize it. So I think it's a really good question. Part of this really depends on your situation and the other classes and everything. But if there's any clear explanation for it, then I would include it. But I don't know, for example, maybe you wanted to take them pass fail because they were outside your major, or maybe you were stretching yourself. Like I could see those being valid excuses if it feels like not excuses, valid explanations. Sorry, don't even hear that word. If there's some reason why you took them, if it's kind of the norm, I wouldn't worry about it. So again, thinking about like what's kind of the norm for me, for where I am, for the school I'm at, and then making a judgment call. Good question.
Yep.
All right, I'll keep going, but chime in if you guys have additional questions. Test scores. So some interesting things here. Well, not that interesting. It's the GMAT or GRE, but there is something interesting. So number one, they say they do not care whether or not you take the GMAT or the GRE. So let's see, both the remote and in-person versions are accepted with no preference. So they really are totally comfortable with either, however you take it. And you can choose which ones. We will accept self-reported scores by the application deadline and welcome either traditional or online version of the exams. So you can go ahead and decide if you've taken the GMAT, giving them the highest score, or the GRE. You can also give them both. Note that it says if you took any of your tests online, please list the dates of those exams below. Again, that's not going to change how they evaluate the data, but they're also interested in collecting data for themselves of how prevalent the online test is, for example, so they're going to want to do that. But I do want to point out this. Hopefully I won't get kicked out of there and I can just do a little back, but we'll see. I can. So one thing that Sloan does offer is a test waiver. They actually introduced this during COVID when people could not reasonably get to a test center before the test went online, but they've kept it in place. So standardized tests, specifically the GMAT and GRE, are a critical component of the application and play an important role. But if your current situation prevents you from being able to submit a test score, you may request a test waiver explaining the situation. The admissions committee will take your request under advisement and let you know that the waiver has been approved, or if the waiver has been approved. If it is approved and you are admitted, you might have to do additional stuff such as taking a course or maybe taking a test. But I mention this because, let's see, I want to just see if I can go. Okay.
Before questions about GMAT, Liza,
yes.
we do have another question about GPA.
Yes.
So on the other hand, if I graduated honor cum laude but GPA is low, do I need to write optional essay to explain?
If you graduate cum laude and you have a low GPA, I don't think so. The only thing I would say is, so I guess what I would try to understand is, like, normally cum laude will be, so if you make sure you have it on your resume, and if it's more that because that it was kind of converted to a 4.0 scale, they'll probably know it. But if you want to, you like, what you don't want to do is overly nitpick on these things. So if you have cum laude on your resume, if it's clear, you could also use some sort of ranking potentially on your resume to indicate the sort of the student that, how highly ranked you were or something like that. I think that will assuage any concern about having a low GPA. But if your GPA is lower, or if you have some blips, just explain it. But again, you don't want to be the person who's like, sometimes like, you don't want to be the person who's trying to defend an A-. An A- is a great score, right? You want to explain like a C+, maybe a B-, maybe a B-. That's it. You don't want to. Nobody wants to hear somebody who's like, well, the only reason I got an A- is because I'm not quite perfect all the time. It just doesn't work. So there's a judgment call there, but think about the other signaling tools that you have at your disposal, like the resume and the rest of your application, that you might not need to explain it in that case.
All right.
Okay. You have another one?
Questions about GMAT. Do you want me to ask it now, or you want to show something first? All right.
Yeah, go for it.
Then what do you think is the lowest quant score I can get to MIT with? Would Q the 44, verbal 44, GMAT 720 be okay?
All right. So any of these questions, it depends. 100% it depends. There will be people with low GMAT scores in the class. I'm guessing there will be folks in the class that have like 600. There'll be people who have 800s. It all depends. So there's no minimum that you need. I will say on this, so this is an important thing. Like, again, if you have a 720, I probably wouldn't do a test waiver. There could be some strategic reasons, but I probably still would say no. It's kind of like the A- situation. But, it is important to know that even though the test waiver was designed for folks in COVID or the COVID situation, when they couldn't get to a testing center, people can now use it if test taking isn't, if they've got other indicators of their analytical strengths. For example, if you've got other proof and you're really not a great test taker, you might think about submitting a test waiver in that case. Can't say that it's always going to be accepted, but I have seen situations where it has been accepted when it's not just because someone can't get to a test center. So food for thought. But I'm happy to take if there was another GMAT question, but the specifics of like this big enough, that's always going to depend on the rest of your application and the rest of the class that Sloan is trying to build.
Yeah, talking about the waiver, does it always have to be financial? And can it be only for candidates with a strong quant background?
Repeat the first half of that question again.
So does the GMAT waiver only applies to for financial situation?
Oh, no. The test waiver, the GMAT waiver, it does not. It could, but sometimes it's been, I've seen folks, and again, I don't know that this is the norm, but I've seen folks who have a strong quantitative background who might not do well on standardized tests, submit a test waiver request and receive the waiver. So it was not a financial thing. It was not that they couldn't get to a test center. It was that they had other proof points and they were not a strong test taker.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I guess you also already answered, is the GMAT waiver only for candidates with strong quant background? So no, right?
I mean, I would say, look, and this is where I'm going to go to the next screen, just in part to make sure we're moving, but also it's related. So Sloan is one of the few schools, it's not the only, but it's one of the few schools that asks about your coursework. They have your transcript, but this is just a really easy way to see, do you have the quantitative and some of the other training, the baseline that they want you to see coming in. So back to that question about, do you have to be really strong quantitatively to get the test waiver? The answer is probably, because it is a rigorous program. Trust me, I was actually just texting with one of our clients who is now a first year at Sloan. He was telling me what ocean he's in, and I was telling him what I was in when I was there many years ago. And he said to me something like, the core is no joke. This work is intense. And this was somebody who had been working in private equity and a very financial numbers-based job. And was like, whoa, this is serious. So they are going to be looking for your analytical reasoning, your critical thinking, and your quantitative skills when they're evaluating that request for the test waiver. And I also bring that up because they have this kind of relevant coursework section. And they ask you, have you taken a calculus course? And if I hit yes, I have to tell them the name of the course and what I learned on, name of the course, where I took it, the course number, so that they can match it up with the transcript, some description of, was this undergrad, et cetera, the grade, was this course 100% devoted to calculus? No, something else. So they ask the nitty gritty. They ask calculus, linear algebra, microeconomics, probability and statistics. And they more recently have added organizational behavior and communications, because I think they want two things, right? They want the liberal arts student, but they also want the engineer, but they want people that can sort of move between both worlds. So they don't want someone who's just quant and so technical that maybe they haven't had a communications class, nor do they want someone who's only had English lit classes or French classes. I took a lot of them, so I'm in that would be me in that bucket. They don't want people who've just taken those courses, so they're just trying to suss out, because they know how rigorous the core is. So they want to make sure, as they get to know you through your test score and your transcript, how hard is that on-ramp going to be? I would also say, if you're coming up short across the board, that doesn't mean you can't apply, but you got to be ready. You might be wanting to think about, if you haven't taken any baseline quant classes like micro and macro, you might want to even take them now, even if you've already submitted or going to be submitting in a week or two, and to tell the school that you're in the process of taking it, just because it'll help you once you enroll, or you can take it and apply round 2. Okay. So
I got more question from Meenakshi. What if I took multiple stats course? Which one should I list in the relevant course section?
I feel like you can, I don't know if you can still do this, we can see, but I think you can either add more or just list a lot of them out. So you can try either one. Otherwise, I would choose probably I would say the most rigorous. Let's see, I think. So, or if you can't enter more, because I know before you could, but maybe you can't anymore. Maybe you only have to choose one. And I think what I would say is, so if you can enter more, enter more. If you do one and ask for another one, go ahead. Otherwise, don't overthink it. But I'd probably choose the most rigorous one, even if it was from a graduate program. Okay.
I've got another question for the GMAT. Should you only submit your highest score if you took the test more than once?
So again, all these are a little bit of judgment, strategic call. If you took it more than once, I have no qualms about revealing multiple. If you took it a lot of times, I'd probably choose 2 and be done with it. But these schools, what they care about most is the highest score. So the only reason I might include more than one, sorry, these are all judgment calls. So there's no this is what you should do, which is why you can tell I'm even well, but there could be a reason to do that. So if you're If like your score isn't great, I might include 2 or something to show that you've tried more than once. If your score's fine, I might just put 1 in there. I think it's like, again, like it's sort of signaling. And so you have to be thinking about what you want to signal. But if you've got a perfectly like average, or, at the median or above, I'd probably just enter 1 and be done with it. Just enter. They can always see your other test scores. Now, if you have one score that is really high on quant and one score that's really high in verbal, that's reason probably to include both of them. So that's when you're going to have to make those strategic or judgment calls based on your scores and the rest of your profile too.
Yep. And
Okay.
follow up for another GMAT question. Is the IR and AWA section important for MIT?
No, I mean, I'd say the schools just don't, like right now it's just, I mean, you don't want a 0 or a 0 on those things, or I don't even know if you can get a 0, 1, and 1. But, for now, the reality is they just don't have the data to back up the schools. When GMAT released the IR, they were hoping that this would become a new tool that the schools could use to evaluate, or like that the score would be predictive of success in the classroom. And so far, from what I understand, they're still finding that the score 200 to 800 is more indicative of someone's future success in the classroom than the IR is. I think that will change, and this is going to be would be way too long and a little bit out of my area of expertise. But with the new GMAT, there are going to be elements of the IR embedded into the quant section. So at that point, the IR is going to become much more important.
All right.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. I want to get to the good stuff. So some of this I'll go a little bit faster, but so here you go. Employment information. So again, like the big thing is read these details, right? You may list up to 3 entries. We will reference your resume for details on any positions prior to these. Please report your salary in US dollars. You may use any current currency conversion scale. Please select your job. Just read all of these because it can save time. I feel like the devil is definitely in the details with all these short answers. The great thing, like MIT doesn't have a lot of them, which is in a weird way a good thing, weird way a bad thing. It's a good thing because it's just less details for you guys to be stressed about. It's a bad thing because there's less space to actually tell them stuff. But in any case, so just to show you the kind of information that is included, you would give the organization name, you will give a brief description of the company, and be, sometimes I review a lot of these sort of short answers. And let's say I used to work at Bain & Company. So the company description might be management consulting firm. Well, that's not very exciting. You don't have to be exciting, but what is special about Bain compared to any other consulting firm? Same with like when you're working at like a private equity firm or an investment bank or a manufacturing company. Tell me a little bit about this. One of my peers, Brooke, she's actually a former member of Harvard's HBS's AdCom. She always says she loved getting to learn things about organizations through the short answers. So don't go overboard. But if you're explaining your company and it happens to be a management consulting firm, don't put in there management consulting firm. Tell us what they specialize in, or even what area you're involved in. Could be anything. Ask a few other additional questions like type of work. Is it like an internship, full-time, hours? And then you have a little bit more on the specific role, starting position, ending position. This is where you're, don't worry if it's the same. If it's different though, they're able to see maybe if there are promotions. Again, a very brief job description. You have to be tight on these characters. There's not, I'm just going to see, it's definitely not a lot of space. And I have a feeling that it's going to go bleep. Oh no, you got more. So you got some, but don't go overboard with these things. But again, be thoughtful. Make it a job description that's really kind of relevant to you. Don't use too much jargon. Let them know what you do. I get a lot of questions of this, like how many people report to you? Everyone's like, nobody. So does that mean I'm not getting in? No, that does not mean you're not getting in if you didn't have people reporting to you. So definitely just enter it and be done with it. Don't worry about it. Don't overthink it. They realize most folks that are applying to an MBA program are not leading teams. Some are, but not everybody. And I am pretty sure that when you do this, you will also be prompted to include your salary information too. So just keep that in mind. And then there's just some other things. Corporate sponsorship. Are you sponsored by your company? And then here is, are there any gaps in your employment history? And again, like, don't, if you were in between jobs, if you took 2 months off to look for a job, don't worry about it. Just explain it. Remember, it's just connecting the dots. You just want to tell them what you were doing, what was going on. I left this job. I was let go from this job. I spent the next 6 months looking. I found this. I kept busy through that. If you were unemployed, so if you were let go, that happens a lot, and it certainly happened recently with a lot of the tech layoffs, and these schools are used to seeing it. That's not going to be a reason that they're like, no, we don't want this person. But what they do want to just know is, okay, what was going on in this gap? I was looking for a job. I took some personal time off to deal with a family member. Just help them understand. That's what's important. Be open and transparent. It's not an essay. Just give them the facts. Okay. This is another thing. The org chart. If you've been working on MIT Sloan, you know about the org chart. I think it was probably about 3 or 4 years ago, that Sloan introduced the org chart. I think it's actually really cool. It's a cool idea. Again, don't fret too much. They just want to see what I say is, like, they just want to see your world, right? Exactly what I was saying about, like, if you work at a consulting firm, don't just write management consulting firm. Help them see your consulting firm, where you work. And part of that is with this org chart. They want to see the world as you see it and where you fit into it. So don't overthink. Do keep it structured. You can look online. There's the great thing is, let's see, if you go to these FAQs, the org chart has some, you've got a sample org chart right on there. I don't know if you guys can see this. I'm guessing you guys can. But if not, I will go back over. But anyway, use the FA. You guys might not be able to see that. But anyway, click on that, and then you can see an example, like a sample org chart, and they've got some more directions depending on the kind of organization that you're in. As you can see, if you're a consultant, entrepreneur, and affiliated with the military, then there's extra guidance on how you can do this. So don't overthink this, but do spend your time to make sure. The thing where I've seen people fall down on this is, like, way overly complicated. And look, they just want to see your world, and they don't want you. You can't have 5 pages to do it. Try to get it. I think it's basically, limit to 2 pages. So do it and make sure that's clear, and then give it to a friend, or give it to a friend and say, does this make sense to you? Just do that, double check. Or if you're working with a consultant, they can do that. But otherwise, give it to a friend and be like, does this make sense? But it's not a big deal. I think it's actually great that they ask this, for what it's worth. Yes.
A question from Bearcat.
Yeah.
I was laid off due to COVID in August 2020 and was unemployed until June of 2021, during which time I worked for my father and the business he owns and operates. I also work with my therapist and life coach on self-improvement. Is that too much information?
So I think it might have been me. I'm not sure, but Erin, you cut out. I heard work with my father's business and then life coach. What was in between those two things?
Therapist. Also work as a therapist.
Oh, he worked as a therapist?
Yeah. No, he worked with his therapist and life coach on self-improvement.
So this is where it kind of depends, but personally, this is all judgment, and I think that the application process is a little bit of a test of strategic communication. That's actually the name of a course at MIT Sloan, strategic communication. So I always use it, but anyway, so this is all a test of strategic communication. What I would say with that is, like, I like the working for your father's business, but I don't know if I would necessarily mention the working with a therapist to work on self-improvement. Not that there's like, it's almost like there's no need to share that. Keep it focused on the professional side of this. And working for your father's business is totally like, so you're still being productive, you're keeping busy until you found that job. That would be my 2 cents. There might be another spot to share that information. But to me, I don't know. If it were me, I wouldn't be sure of how someone's going to interpret it. So I'm not going to throw it out there. I'm not going to let them make that judgment call. I don't need to share that. That would be me. That's my, so you might come with another decision, but that would be my recommendation on that.
Mm-hmm. And Abisola here also asked, could putting your salary potentially impact your changes for fellowship or percentage of the scholarship over all MBA fees?
So not the merit-based ones, no. Not for the most part, no. So the scholarship, I mean, the scholarships, really the merit-based scholarships. So for financial aid, yes, but financial aid is for those who are, have financial need, but the merit-based scholarships, they are not looking at what you earn to evaluate whether or not you would get a merit-based scholarship. They're looking at everything else.
What about the corporate sponsorship?
So I think in that case, they would disregard. They asked that question, so my thinking is they would, probably give the money to someone who's not being corporate sponsored.
Mm-hmm. And one more about the employment.
Yeah.
So Fakhri is in between jobs and will start the next one in October after round 1 deadline.
Yep.
Should I add it in the employer information or in explanation box?
I think I would. I think I would add it in the employment box if it's definite, if you're definitely starting and you have a start date. And then I think like you'll have to play around and see how this works in it. But like, I think you could say, the name starting effective 10, October 30th or whatever. I don't know. And then like just carry that through so they know. I would also make sure it's on your resume. But the only other thing I would say is, so they only allow up to 3 employers. So depending on what else you have to share, it might be worth, you might not want to steal one of those spots for a job you haven't started, in which case I would still have it on your resume and just have, start date effective, blah, blah, 10 October 15th. And then use the 3 for jobs that you've had. And then you can use that optional essay, but otherwise like the box, like any gaps. But otherwise, I think you could also potentially, as long as you're super transparent about it, you could, I think, enter it as a current, but just make sure they know you haven't started yet.
Mm-hmm. And can the courses like under employment can be included, or is it only for academic based learning?
No, it said stuff about certification. So you definitely can. Like I had somebody recently who he had taught himself via, like, it was like a Duolingo program. He didn't speak any Spanish, but he had an internship in Chile and he taught himself Spanish using Duolingo. And I said, on his way down, like he did it on his way down. And then when he was down there, he did it every night. I'm like, include that because it just helps us. Like that could be a little bit of a stretch, but to me, it actually helped him get near, conversational, like kind of like rudimentary fluent. But definitely for professional degrees, certifications, all that you should, there's a spot, I didn't spend much time on it, but the bottom of the either academics or relevant coursework that asks that, and you can definitely include it. I think that's great.
Okay, cool.
All right. So I want to keep us moving because I think we have about 10 minutes and I do want to get to these bigger pieces, the cover letter. So basically Sloan has, I'd say kind of like one required essay, one fun video, another little essay. And then you have a few later essays when you get interviewed. But I always love this because, again, they've changed this a little bit in the years. And so I always love reading the sort of setup. MIT Sloan seeks students whose personal characteristics demonstrate that they will make the most of the incredible opportunities at MIT, both academic and non-academic. We are on a quest to find those whose presence will enhance the experience of other students. We seek thoughtful leaders with exceptional intellectual abilities and the drive and determination to put their stamp on the world. We welcome people who are independent, authentic, and fearlessly creative, true doers. We want people who can redefine solutions to conventional problems and strive to preempt unconventional dilemmas with cutting-edge ideas. We demand integrity and respect passion. I love that. And then they say, taking the above into consideration, please submit a cover letter seeking a place in Sloan's program. 300 words. This is an incredibly challenging, very short essay to write, because you need to sort of show that you are the person that they're looking for. And it's not an easy task in so few words. So my advice to you here is what they don't want. Remember, they have your resume. They have all those short answers. They know where you went to school and what you majored in, and they have a lot of the facts already. So when you're thinking about this cover letter, you want to think about one or two examples that illustrate how you are the person that they're looking for. One thing I think that always makes Sloan a little special too is that, they've always said historic performance is the best indicator of future success. So what that means is they don't want to just hear what your future goals are, why Sloan, because they're looking for, okay. I'm afraid I just lost you guys for a second, but so what they're looking for is evidence in what you've done. That's their best proof of what you will do going forward, or like what your potential is. So wasting a lot of airtime on your goals, it's just not valuable, because there's no proof. That it almost doesn't matter what you say you want to go do. They want to understand what you've done. So the other thing, and I would encourage you to visit Gatehouse's website. We have some essay analysis for MIT Sloan, but really think about examples that demonstrate who you are, and maybe like 10% of this cover letter is allocated towards why Sloan and/or what you're doing in the future. Spend your time on this. It's surprising how such a short essay you're going to wrangle with, but you need to make it really capture who you are in a way that resonates and captivates the admissions team. Okay. The only thing I'd say on the resume, so a few things, 1 page, they say it in bold, 1-page resume. For some people, they're used to having 2 pages. Get it down to 1. It's good. It's a great exercise. You want someone to be able to scan it and get it and see why you're such a superstar at every bullet. The other thing is Sloan's they want you to do it starting with education. Every other school out there, and the way resumes work is you start with professional experience and then your education. Sloan wants to be different. That's all right. I like it. So start with your education. Just follow. So in other words, you've got your resume. Spend a little time checking this out. I've definitely seen people submit their resume as is. It's no biggie. But I'm also kind of a believer, if they want to see it in this fashion, you should give it to them in that fashion. Okay. And then LinkedIn. Sometimes I get a question like, uh-oh, my gosh, like I don't have a LinkedIn. Is this terrible? Should I go create it? Like, no, I mean, maybe you should create one, but don't worry if you don't have anything up there. But if you do have something up there, definitely take a peek, polish it up and use it. It's another great way for Sloan to see you in a new way. And that's a good thing, because there's not a ton of spaces on this application to get to know you. Again, don't worry if you don't have it. Don't worry if it's blank. It doesn't particularly matter. On a side note, check all your social media before you hit submit. Facebook, Instagram, anywhere that someone can come and see you, just make sure that you would want, the head of admissions from Sloan seeing. If not, make your stuff private. I definitely have seen that happen, which kind of surprised me. So make sure your stuff is private, or be comfortable with what people can see. Okay, just a few other things. So recommendation instructions. So Sloan 3 years ago, I hope you guys like it when I tell you kind of like how Sloan has evolved over the years, but I think about 3 years ago, they used to have 2 recommendations. Now they dropped them down to just one letter of recommendation. Sloan believes that it has enough information with the rest of its application in this 1 letter. That's all it needs. But it does also ask for 2 references. So in some ways, you've got a lot of pressure on this 1 letter, but if they need more, they can call one of the 2 references or contact one of the 2 references that you provide. So I like this too. They make sure you select an individual qualified to speak about your results as a professional and your potential as a leader. And then they give us a set of questions. Mind you, these are not all the questions that they're asked, but what you want to think about is whoever you ask should be able to answer all these questions. Like an example of the time that you impacted a person, a group, or organization, a time how you example that illustrates how you work with people. This will help you figure out who is the most appropriate to ask. You want an advocate, you want someone who's senior to you and someone who knows you well and has seen you in action. Often what I say, you've made their life better because they depend on you doing a good job. Okay. And then you will fill in the information and your recommender will upload it. So you're going to fill in the recommender information here, fill it all out, and then they'll get the information and they can actually then go ahead and fill it out. So here I want to go to the additional references. So this is actually really cool because as you can see here, they actually, this is one of the few schools that does this, that asks for an additional reference, and they ask for 2. So we want to make sure we give you your best chance to show us your strengths. If we still have questions after reading your application, we might reach out to your additional references. Similar to the recommender, these additional reference contacts should be able to speak to your professional and or academic background. And then they must provide contact information, et cetera, et cetera. So this is great. And one thing I see is, so you got the name, email, telephone. Can this person, are they proficient speaking in English? And then if not, let's see. Okay, no, I was going to see if they asked for what language they're proficient in. But what's great about this is this just gives you another chance to find advocates for you and make sure that they're included in the application. All right, I want to make sure we get to 2 more things. The video. If you're working on this, I hope you guys are working on the video. Super fun. You are basically, you're going to take a video of yourself saying hi to your future Sloan classmates, and no more than 60 seconds. It's not to be edited, so it's single take. And I love it. Here's the big clue. The big clue, I don't know if you guys can see my mouse, but I'm going to pretend you guys can regardless. Introduce yourself to your future classmates. Notice that it does not say introduce yourself to the admissions committee, because they want to see you they want to see you, not trying to be somebody you think the admissions committee wants to see. They want to see who you're going to be in the classroom. And often I tell folks, look, you're going to be so excited to meet your classmates. As you practice your video, think about is that the kind of person I want to meet? Or do I feel like that person's trying to be wicked braggy and brag on all their accomplishments? That doesn't sound cool. So it's almost like a way that you can gauge, am I being myself? Am I being authentic? Have fun, introduce yourself, tell them a few interesting things about you. My other piece of biggest advice is speak slowly and don't try to cram too much. It'll go fast. And don't make it too complicated. They don't need bells and whistles. I know that there's somebody that once did it jumping out of skydiving out of a plane. It just seems way too much. You could just be sitting in front of your camera like me and just having fun with it. So enjoy it. Don't overthink it. They just want to put a face to the name. And then the other one question. So this is kind of gone through a lot of this, but this is the last big piece. And I'm actually can't remember what the additional questions is, so we're going to see that in a second. But optional question. We'd like to give you the opportunity to expand on your background. This question is completely optional. How has the world you come from shaped who you are today? For example, your family, culture, community, all help to shape aspects of your life experiences and perspective. Please use this opportunity if you would like to share more about your background. So there's 250 words or less. You know, I don't know. We're all shaped from our upbringing and where we grew up, our family, our culture, our communities. And to me, like, everyone's got a story to tell, something to share about your situation, your upbringing, who you are. So personally, I would encourage you all to take an opportunity to fill it out. It'll just give Sloan, remember how I said that with the org chart, it helps them see your world. So does answering this question. So I definitely would encourage you to share something here for sure. It's a great, like, I love reading these of our clients at Gatehouse. I always love discovering more about our clients through these kinds of questions. So I feel certainly the admissions committee will too. All right, guys.
Quick reminder, we have 4 minutes left.
Yep. So the last questions, there's nothing, the only other thing, like, these are just kind of like, when have you ever applied? Student conduct. Be honest here. They ask things about, have you ever been disciplined at school? Do you have a criminal record? There will be a background check. So make sure you're honest. The other thing here is the MIT community. They ask, have you attended any MIT Sloan admissions events? If you say yes, they want to know exactly which ones you attended. So I will say, my other tip, sign up for these now. So you have something to enter into this box. Don't leave it blank. So make sure you're doing it. You're doing your research. All right, guys. I think that's about it. I love talking. I love Sloan. I had an amazing time there. So I wish all of you guys luck. Good luck in applying to Sloan. And, you know, at Gatehouse, we do admissions consulting. We always love talking to folks applying to any school. But if you are looking for extra support on Sloan, definitely reach out. You can sign up for a free consultation on the website. As I said, I always really enjoy talking to people who are thinking about Sloan. It's a great place. Erin, any final questions before we wrap?
I think I can ask like 1 or 2 questions. Is salary inclusive of bonus or just the base pay?
It's a good question. I think it's actually separated into both. So I think you can go ahead and enter both in there. If it's not, that's when I would probably give them a call and ask, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. And for the recommendation, it can be from the previous boss, right?
Yeah. Yes, it can.
And should we put like the past role or their new role?
Oh, good question. I would say their title, when filling it out, do the real one, the new one, and then have the recommender explain in the letter, like, I worked for them, you know, at this organization from this time to that time.
Mm-hmm. That sounds great. And also one more is about struggling how to zoom in, go to the organization chart. Only direct him all the way up to the CEO. What are your thoughts?
It depends. I think whenever possible, I personally, if you have 2 pages, I would want to show all the way to the top, even if, like, obviously, like, you don't have to show everything, like, but you have to get kind of creative. And that's the other thing. It's a little bit, you don't want to overstate it, like, but it is a little bit, you know, testing your ability to communicate data and information in a way that's easily digestible. But if you could use both pages, like, you know, the first page is like a microcosm of you, and then the next page could be like where your team is in relation to the CEO.
And it can be colorful chart too, I guess, right?
Yeah. You can use. I mean, I wouldn't go. Again, we don't want like a eye candy, right? Or like a whatever, like a eyesore. We don't want like 15 million colors and you're like, wait, what? You want to make sure that it makes sense. But yeah, there can definitely be color on there.
All right.
Oh, so all right, if we're creative, can we design a color for our chart? I would use your test of, can you give it to a stranger and would they get it? If they get it, you're fine. But if they're like, wait a second, I don't get it, you've gone too creative and the school's not going to get it. Part of this is like, I often get that question on a resume. If I'm in a creative field, should I do a creative resume? Just remember, they're not used to seeing that. So it's actually might hinder, like it becomes maybe a barrier for them to quickly understand what you're trying to communicate.
All right. I think that's a wrap. Liza, thank you very much for your time.
Yeah.
And thank you, folks, for joining us. I hope to see you again in the next session.
Thanks,
And
everybody.
reach out to Liza directly if you have further questions.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Have a good time. Bye.